Hey guys, it's Alex, and today I'm going to be showing you how to install the Mini vMac emulator on your computer. This is an emulator similar to Sheepshaver that runs versions of the classic Mac OS, allowing you to run your classic Mac OS software on a modern computer. However, Mini vMac is a bit different than Sheepshaver because it emulates a classic 68K Mac instead of a PowerPC Mac. And in particular, it emulates a Macintosh Plus computer from 1986. Because of this, Mini vMac is useful for running really old Macintosh software from before the PowerPC era, and it can run any version of the macOS system software from System 1 to System 7.5. By the time this tutorial is over, you'll know how to install the Mini vMac emulator and how to copy your old applications and games over to it so that you can use them again. So, without further ado, let's get started. So the first thing that we're going to want to do to get Mini vMac installed is to actually download the Mini vMac emulator itself. So I went to this website right here, and all these links are going to be down in the description, so you can just click on them in order to access all the sites that I'm going to. And this will bring me to the download page for Mini vMac. So if you're running Mac OS on your modern computer, you're going to want to download this option right here, the x86-64 for Mac OS. And if you're running Windows, you're going to want to download the x86-64 for Windows right here. And I've already downloaded this, so let's go over to the Finder and check it out. So I've already downloaded all the files that we're going to need for this entire tutorial today, so you can just ignore most of them except for this one file, the Mini vMac file itself that we just downloaded. So what we're going to want to do is we're just going to want to double click on this to extract the zip file, and we just get this Mini vMac application here. This is the actual emulator itself. And we're going to want to put this in its own folder just to keep things organized. So I'm just going to make a new folder, and I'm going to call it Mini vMac. And now I can just move the actual emulator into this folder. So now we can just go into this folder and double click on the emulator to open it. And as you can see, it says it's unable to locate a ROM image. It needs this ROM image from a real Macintosh Plus in order to boot up. And it can't find that ROM image in this folder, so we're going to need to provide one for it. Now that is where the second download comes in. The second download here is from Macintosh repository, and it's just a collection of all of the old world Macintosh ROM files, including these right here for the Mac Plus that we're going to be using. So just download from this first link right here, oldworldmacroms.zip, and then we can go back over into Finder. And here is that file that we downloaded. So I'm just going to double click it to extract the zip. And here we are. Inside this directory is every single old world Mac ROM that was ever released. So we can go in there, and now the Macintosh Plus ROM is going to be under the 128 kilobyte ROMs folder. So we can go in there and we see Mac Plus V1, V2, and V3. And we're just going to want to pick V3 because it's the latest one. And I'm just going to copy that. And then we can go back over into our folder and just paste that right here. And if you might have noticed this when we started up Mini vMac, it said that it wanted this file to be called vmac.rom. So I'm just going to go in and rename this file to vmac.rom. And notice the capital M in Mac, and that ROM is also in all caps. So now that that's renamed, we can just launch Mini vMac again, and we can hear the startup chime of the old Mac booting up. So now we're just at this blinking floppy disk screen, which means that the Mac wants us to insert a floppy disk that it can boot off of. And you may notice that this question mark that's on the floppy disk is blinking faster than it would on an actual classic Mac computer. And that's because Mini vMac by default is set to run a lot faster than a classic Mac, so that all your file operations and CPU operations run faster. And you can change this if you want by holding down Control to bring up this options menu, and then press S in order to bring up the speeds menu, and then you can press any of these different keys in order to change the speed to the specified values. Currently it's at 8 times normal speed, and I'm just going to leave it there for my purposes because that will greatly speed up the operating system install and all the things that we're going to be doing in the future. But you can change that if you want. So now we just need some floppy disks that we can insert into this virtual floppy drive so that we can get macOS installed on this thing. So I'm just going to close out of the emulator and go back into Chrome. And you can see here I have this other tab open where I'm downloading macOS 7.1. And this emulator can run any version of macOS from the original macOS 1.0 all the way up to 7.5. But for this tutorial, I'm just going to be using 7.1. And I downloaded it from this link right here, and I already have it in Finder here. So we can go back into my downloads folder, and here it is. Here's that download. So I'm just going to double click this to extract it. And inside, you can see that we have all the disk images that we need in order to install macOS. So in order to mount these in the mini vMac emulator, we can simply drag them over the window and drop them, and it will automatically detect the disk. But we can't really install an operating system without having a hard drive to install it on. And some of the earlier operating systems, such as System 1 through, I believe, System 5, they can run without a hard disk. You just boot straight from the floppy disk and you're in the operating system. But anything after that, it's best to install it onto a hard disk. So in order to get a hard disk working in mini vMac, we can download something from this next link. This is also from the same people who made mini vMac, and it is this zip file which contains a whole bunch of blank disk images. And we can use one of these as our hard disk. So I just downloaded this right here, and we can see it in my downloads folder right here. So let me just unzip that. And now we have this folder that's just full of a bunch of floppy disk images and hard disk images. And I'm going to want to make my hard disk fairly large so that I can fit a lot of stuff on it. So I'm going to go into this M folder, which means megabytes, because these disk images are several megabytes in size. And then we can see all these different disk images that we have to pick from. And I'm just going to pick the 224 megabyte one because it's the largest, and really you can pick any of these that you want, just depending on how much space you want on this Mac. So I'm just going to double click this to unzip it, and you can see that we get this disk image here. So this is just a blank disk image with absolutely nothing in it, and we can use this as our hard drive. So I'm just going to drag this over to our mini vMac folder. So let me just put that in there. And now it's in the mini vMac folder, I'm just going to rename it to something that makes a little bit more sense. I'm just going to name it System 7.1 because that's what I'm going to be installing on this hard disk. So now we can actually get down to installing System 7 on this emulated Mac. So first, I'm just going to open up mini vMac, and we get the blinking floppy disk screen once again. And now I'm going to go back into this macOS 7.1 folder that we downloaded earlier, and I'm going to drag this install.img image onto the mini vMac window, just like this, and it's going to boot from that disk, as you can see. And we have booted into the macOS installer. And one other thing we're going to need to do before we actually install macOS is to mount that hard disk that we just created. So I'm also just going to drag that onto the mini vMac window. And even though nothing seemed to happen, it now has been mounted. So now we can just proceed through installing macOS. So I'm going to hit OK. And you can see that it wants to place the system software on a hard disk named Untitled. And that is that hard disk image that we just created. So we can just click Install. And now it's going to go through the install process. I'm going to probably speed this up a little bit so I can go into the speed menu, and I'm going to just go with A for all out. So now it's just going to go as fast as it possibly can. And now it wants the install to disk, which is back over in the macOS installer folder here. So now we just drag install to over onto the mini vMac window, just like that. And now, since it was sped up so much, it's already finished with that disk. So now it wants tidbits, so we just drag that image over as well. Now it wants the printing disk. And now the fonts disk. And now it wants the original install disk again to finish up. And now it says installation on Untitled was successful. So since we're finished installing the software now, we can just click quit to exit this installer. And now when we click restart, it's going to reboot this Macintosh. And we are back to the blinking floppy disk window. And I'm going to slow the speed down a little bit since that question mark icon is going way too fast. So I'm going to slow it back down to 8x speed since we're done installing the operating system. So now theoretically, macOS 7.1 should be installed on this disk here. So I'm just going to drag this disk over the mini vMac window. And here we are in System 7.1. And as we can see, this is a Macintosh Plus, and it has 4 megabytes of RAM just like we wanted it to. So everything seems to be working well at this point. So now all we have to do is figure out how to transfer applications and games over to this emulator. First, I'm just going to rename this hard disk to something that makes a little bit more sense, like Macintosh HD, so that it's not just named Untitled. So now in order to get files copied over to this, there are a couple different ways to do it, but it's not too confusing. So I've downloaded several different games and things for the Macintosh here. And you can see here I downloaded Crystal Quest from Macintosh repository, Space Quest 1 as well, Arkanoid, and ResEdit. That will come into play later. I'll show you that along with Arkanoid because we're going to need that in order to get Arkanoid running. So I'm going to start out with Crystal Quest here. I'm going to go back into my downloads folder, and we can see right here where I downloaded Crystal Quest. So I'm just going to open this zip file, and we get this folder up here with a DSK image inside it. Getting these DSK images over to the emulated Mac is really easy because we can just drag them over the mini vMac window, and the disk will mount really easily just like that. And now we can go in and launch the game. And there it is. Crystal Quest is running on our emulator. And I'm not actually going to play this, so I might as well just quit out of the game. So that's the really easy way to get things installed when you're just working with disk images. Anything with a .image format or a .img extension will also mount the exact same way. So that was fairly straightforward. Now let's move on to Space Quest 1. So I'm just going to extract this sit file here. This is a StuffIt archive, and we can see that inside that StuffIt archive was the spacequest1.img disk image file. And sometimes when you extract these sit files, you're going to get an image file like this that you can just drag over and mount in mini vMac. But sometimes, as is the case with Arkanoid, when we extract its sit file, instead we get this folder here with the actual game executable inside it. And this isn't going to work because whenever we open this on our modern Mac, it loses its resource fork, which contains the type and creator information that tells the vintage Mac how to deal with the files. So we're not going to be able to copy it over this way. What we're going to have to do for Arkanoid is we're going to have to copy that sit file over to the old Mac as is, and then extract it on the old Mac where that information will be preserved. So before we do that, I just want to show you that the Space Quest image also works fine. And there it is. We can see it mounted when I dragged it over. And then we can just go into these folders and start up the game. And it's asking us to insert the disk Macintosh HD, which is just the hard disk image that we created earlier. It does this sometimes. It's kind of strange. I'm not really sure why. But here we go. As we can see, the game is working perfectly. So I can just quit out of that now that we know it's working. And I'm just going to eject the disk image by moving it to the trash. And now let's move on to that sit file from Arkanoid that we want to deal with. So we need to get this over to mini vMac. But as you can see, if I just drag it over, mini vMac is thinking that it's a disk image, and it's really not. It's a StuffIt archive that contains files, and it's asking us if we want to initialize the disk. And we most definitely do not want to initialize the disk, because that will erase whatever is in that sit file, and the game will be gone. So we definitely don't want to do that. We just want to eject it. And the real way that we actually get a sit file mounted in mini vMac is through this utility called importfl. And what this does is it allows us to simply drag and drop files between the mini vMac installation and our modern computer. And they don't have to be DSK files or IMG files. They can be any kind of file we want, and it will simply let us drag them back and forth. So I'm just going to download it from right here. And as you can see, here it is in my downloads folder. So I'm just going to open this zip and go into the importfl folder. And here we can see that importfl is an application that runs on the emulated Mac, and it's in this disk image here. So I just need to drag this disk image over to the emulated Mac so that we can run it on this old Mac. And I'm just going to copy the import FL application over to the actual Macintosh hard disk so that we'll have it there for safekeeping if we ever need to use it in the future. So using this is incredibly straightforward. You just launch the import FL application and it says ready to import. So now all we have to do is drag that sit file over into the mini vMac window. And it asks us to select a destination, so I'm just going to put it on the desktop so that it's easily accessible. And there it is. There's that Arkanoid sit file. And so now I can just quit out of import FL because we are done with it by now. But you'll notice if I try and open Arkanoid, it's going to complain about it not being able to be opened because the application that created it couldn't be found. So this is where that ResEdit program comes in. I downloaded it from that same Macintosh repository website, and the link's in the description. And I'm just going to extract the zip here. And we can see that ResEdit, it complains that it can't completely expand the archive, but then we can just double click it again here, and it expands just fine into this image here. So now we can just drag this image over to the mini vMac installation once again. And I'm going to copy this ResEdit program over to the Macintosh hard disk because it's also quite useful and we're probably going to want to keep it. So now that it's on the Macintosh hard disk, we can just eject the ResEdit floppy. And now what we're going to want to do is use ResEdit to change the type and creator of this Arkanoid stuffit file so that it's recognized as a proper archive. Because when we had it in the modern Mac OS, it lost its resource fork, which stores the type and creator that tells this old classic Mac OS how to deal with it. So we're going to use ResEdit to add that back. So to do that, I'm just going to open ResEdit and then click that to make it go away. And now I can select the file that I want to open in it. So I'm just going to go to the desktop and I'm going to open Arkanoid. And it says that it doesn't have a resource fork, so I'm going to create one by opening it. And then I'm going to go to File, and I'm going to select Get Info for Arkanoid. So now we can see the type and creator information that ResEdit has automatically given this file, but we want to change that to make it look like a stuffit archive, which is what it actually is. So we can find all these type and creator codes on the internet on this website here, so we can see which types and which creators correspond to what formats for what applications. And we can see here that a sit exclamation point type and a sit exclamation point creator is the proper type and creator for a stuffit archive. So we need to just change both the type and creator to sit exclamation point. And this is case sensitive, so make sure that you get the case correct. So I'm going to do sit exclamation point and sit exclamation point for type and creator, and then I'm just going to close out of this and save my changes. And now we can just quit ResEdit, and this sit file should now be recognized as a stuffit expander archive. But as you can see, we still can't actually open it because we don't have the stuffit expander program installed in Mac OS here. So we're going to need to also get that from yet another link that I provided in the description so that we can get this installed. So I got this stuffit expander program from Macintosh repository yet again. I just downloaded this bottom one right here, the zip file. And if we go over into my downloads folder, we can see right here, this is that zip file I downloaded. So I'm just going to extract that, and it's going to give this error, but that doesn't really matter because we have the img file right here. So now all we have to do is drag that over onto mini vMac in order to mount this disk image. And we can see here we have the stuffit expander folder. So we can just click on stuffit expander, and now the expander is running. So it should be able to recognize this file now and extract it. So we can just go to File, Expand, and then go to the desktop and select that Arkanoid image. So now we just click Expand, and it should expand into our game. And as you can see here, it's unstuffing Arkanoid. So now we can just quit out of stuffit expander and close these extraneous windows. So now we can just go into this Arkanoid folder, and here's the game. So that's how you get a stuffit sit file that you download off the internet, copied over to mini vMac, and expanded and working properly. So I think that's just about all I'm going to cover in this video, since I have now explained how to get mini vMac running and how to copy files over to it. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Leave a comment if you have any questions, and remember to like and subscribe. I'll see you next time.